All right, my name is Brian Colligan, and welcome to another Masters of Marketing. I'm here with Ross Gates. Ross, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Brian? What are you going to teach us today?
Well, we were supposed to have a speaker, and our speaker did not show up. So I'm going to go through a bunch of things that have been on the top of mind that I've been seeing in social, and I think that are like super interesting, top of mind, killing it, different. Oh, who's sharing? Is that me sharing? Oh, Jody's sharing. Got it. Jody, I'm going to take away the sharing for a second here, and then we can kind of follow up with
Yeah,
some of
no problem.
the notes. Okay, cool. So this is a good. All right, can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right, so this is Gyame. He's one of the preeminent growth hackers. Probably like considered like top 10 growth hacker in the world, really. Goes by G infamously. If you ever see one of his talks or go into one of his events, he's awesome. And I saw this basically last Thursday or Friday, and we had this interesting conversation. I think it was with Christoph Trapp. And Christoph had this interesting kind of conversation around content, around ads, and we had a little tangential topic where we talked about how effective certain Google AdWord campaigns are. And we've ran a bunch of Google AdWord campaigns, and a lot of the times when you're running a Google AdWord campaign, when you have to like get the copy down to a very single like snippet of information, it takes a lot of um, the copy that you write can convert highly, but it may not be good for your long-term LTV. And so one of the things that when I saw this, I was like, oh, it's a trap, right? So a lot of times these growth hackers are super interesting, or when you're posting something on social, you have like this question where you're going to get a lot of people trapped into the answer. And so you ask the question, looking at these two campaigns, which one would you keep? And it has impressions, clicks, cost per click, leads, and cost per lead in there. And so if you just looked at these numbers, you would say, oh, well, running the two campaigns against these two ads, I'd go with the cost per lead of $54.63. And so the correct answer, as he dives into the thread, is that actually you don't have enough information on which campaign that you should run, right? So going from the primary numbers at the very top of the funnel of like a lot of ads that you have, the amount of impressions, the amount of clicks, and if you're running two campaigns on Google and AdWords and a lot of the other like platforms like Facebook, when you're running these like two campaigns, what it's going to do is going to optimize for cost per lead and not necessarily revenue all the time. And so some of the platforms or some of the ads that you run, as you dive down into what are the actual conversions, what are the actual marketing qualified leads, how much pipeline does it drive, how much does it close versus win, and what's the ROA on any individual ad and campaign, you have to drive it down all the way down to the lifetime value of the customer. And that's why it's a lot easier to do ads for e-commerce products, which are like one-time purchases on social versus $100,000 ACV or ATV, basically long-term cycles, because you need to start to record the metrics. As his example says in his tweet, he goes on to say that there isn't enough KPIs to answer in the original post because you're not looking at conversions and closed and won. So that even though that the cost per lead was $54.63 on this one ad, the actual ROI was 39 times, which is amazing, by the way. And they won $97,000 worth of deals. But the actual ad that they should continue to run is the one that costs $125.80 per lead, which closed at 51 times ROI and $187,000 worth of one projects. And I've experienced this ourselves on our own campaigns when we were doing Alpha Voice. Our biggest well-placed ad, and the one that was converting that Google kept on spinning out and feeding, and I thought our numbers were going through the roofs, was one about a free trial. How to get more views to your videos on a free trial. And it just created a persona that was looking for something for free. Even though we were getting the conversion rates and we're getting all these trials, our churn for that particular advertisement was like through the roof. And we were getting crushed on that. And so I've seen a lot of other cases like this in the past, but that's one that's coming top of the mind. And I saw this last couple of days that I thought was interesting.
So my questions on this are, how long do you run a campaign like this before you actually make an assessment? Because if you're making it on lifetime value and you have to spend $25 per click, I don't know how many clicks you need to get there. Seems like you're going to spend $20,000, $30,000 before you can make a decision.
1.5 sales cycles. So what's your
So if you're
sales
selling a
cycle?
product that takes 12 months to sell, you have to run a campaign like this for 18 months.
Yes. Which is
What if you're
rough,
selling
right?
a brand new product, like you're a startup and you don't know how long the sales cycle is? Because like running for Alpha Voice, we don't know how long it takes us to get one specific user to use the video platform.
Yeah, I mean, it's really rough, and that's why enterprise companies that make it are institutions, and they're hard to dismantle. Um, what you want to do is you actually want to go back to slide one, and so if you're not getting the cost per lead, or you're not getting the clicks and the CPCs that you need, I mean, we ran the stuff um, on LinkedIn where we were paying $200 CPMs, and we got like one lead after like $1,000 test, and we cut it, right? Like, we're just like, cool. Like, we knew that one lead, like one qualified lead that could be a client that we wanted in our target range, was going to be an actual marketing qualified lead. After $1,000 spend, like, it was just too high for us. So, I mean, we
For
were
sure.
able to kind of get it to this stage. The person ghosted. They didn't follow up. If they turned into pipeline and we closed and we won it, maybe we would have invested more. But in general, $1,000 per platform on any particular campaign you can start to test. And there's ancillary benefits of not going for direct conversion in terms of ads. You can do branding, you can do brand lift. I think if we get to the point in terms of account-based marketing strategies, on a deck that I recently saw that was pretty cool and it had a really nice breakdown. There's some strategies around account-based marketing where it's not necessarily conversion based, it's brand lift based. And you can start to kind of figure out what the individual customer journey for the individual persona at the individual account is. And you're gonna be spending a lot, but if that closes a 6-figure deal and you have to eat $200 worth of ads to close a 6-figure deal on everybody in account, then it's obviously worth it.
For sure. Just to play off something that you said earlier, I was selling $2,000 classes and we were seeing 20-cent clicks on Twitter and a bunch of people were looking at our ads. But it turns out they were all German college students, apparently, who just really like design. And then we were spending $7 or $8 clicks on LinkedIn and spending a bunch of money. But it turns out we actually kind of broke even on those ads because you get 5 people from LinkedIn to sign up for $2,000 class, it's paid for itself. But seeing the comparison, that LinkedIn actually got canceled before Twitter got canceled because the numbers at the beginning when they're large make people feel really good. So when you're just getting started, you got to get a pipeline. My secondary question for you is, for me, both of those are running at the same time. How do you run ads on those two different channels and separate the two so that you know one is actually leading to leads if you're targeting the same audience on both channels?
You just wire up all of the UTM codes. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yeah.
Should we go into UTM code wiring?
I mean, very quickly, but I think
Okay, cool. So
go on to the next one.
UTM code wiring is basically like, I'm going to go and try to find an ad, and boom, we have a promoted ad right here. If we kind of click through this on any single ad in the UTM codes, it will have a campaign listed in there. And so this is aligning in their Google Analytics, their Mixpanel, the campaign that they're actually running, right? So then you can campaign when you line up your UTM codes in, we use Mixpanel and Google Analytics. What essentially you can do is then compare the source of traffic and how much revenue is pumping out of the source of traffic, and all the way down to the individual creative. So if you take this end of the URL, let's see, I'm not going to go through and decode it right now, but essentially they're saying the campaign's called Item Secret Purpose. They're looking to target, looks like they were looking to target people with an Android in the US. And it looks like I have desktop. The source, UTM source is Twitter. And as you kind of scroll into there, this UTM medium, I don't know what their WC stands for. It's probably like an internal coding. But essentially what that means is they've identified this exact ad of who they were trying to target, like desktop or Android in the US, and the source of Twitter. And what they're going to do is see how many of these convert and what's their spend versus their audience clicks. So what they're really trying to do is trying to brand build to generate an audience. And these clicks must be cheap because, you know, the CPM, they're playing the CPM game where if I can buy enough clicks on Twitter, then I can raise my advertising prices on my blog to then, if I can make 1 penny more than what I spent, I'm good with that. And so they're playing like a high frequency trading game where they probably have it priced into their algorithm on any given day, how much they're willing to spend and how much a click is worth. And if they're not, then they're just doing it wrong because they're like a publication.
Got it. Cool.
All right.
Let's go to the next growth hack.
All right. So I met another Facebook group owner. He or somebody who was posting on Facebook. He had a really interesting post. I don't have it up and ready, but I started going after and looking at who he was, and he had a group on Facebook of about like 300, 400 people with cold email campaigns. And I went into the group. There was some interesting information in there, and I followed him up on his company. So his company doesn't exist, right? This is his website. This is his page. It just doesn't exist at all. And the piece of content that I thought was really interesting, because we also do some sales automation and email automation, was this calculator that he had built. And I was really surprised, and we started a conversation, and we just started getting to talking about kind of like where he's at, where he's going through. Zero product, zero funding, a waiting list of over 500 people that want his product. And it's a sales automation. There's lots of sales automation out there, Active Campaign, Mixpanel, Mixmax, of course, Fission Mail. We haven't launched it yet, but we haven't launched it because he's actually in the same problem that we have. He found out, like we found out, that if you want to get your Gmail API authenticated and push through so that you can start to do some interesting information around understanding replies and spam rate and get a deeper level of data, you have to pay Google third party around, they quoted us at like $35,000 to pen test our API. And it was amazing. But anyways, the growth hack is, we were talking about that. And then the growth hack was this calculator that he put together, which I thought was like super interesting. And this was the content that was like super intriguing. And it's interesting because a lot of people say that outbound email or outbound email campaigns, they don't want to spam and they don't work. And when you put something like this, like a calculator up here for our own campaigns, we're either going to build a copy of this or just use this for our own campaigns. We're doing some outbound email campaigns right now, one for a client and one for ourselves. We got somebody in the chat. Oh, cool. Thanks, Jody. And it's really, I think it's really amazing that when you put an ROI in from somebody, and I know we do this ourselves, but sometimes we don't eat our own dog food in terms of activities that we do ourselves. Like we're doing this campaign for like 20,000 people that are new marketers and new growth hackers across the US. And it's working well. We have an 80% open rate, but we never really kind of ran the numbers all the way through at the beginning. We know we need to do this to raise our brand, to raise awareness, and then help generate revenue later on from this campaign. But essentially, we didn't really think about the revenue targets. What's the reply rates? What's our book meeting rate? What's our own sales journey, sales customer journey? And so it was really interesting to us about, hey, we got a lot to do in our sales pipeline. We're generating leads, we're generating conversations, but I didn't have answers to these. I had answers to all the way. I didn't have these three answers, right? So we had everything above, but this is more how marketing kind of converges with sales and where the crossover is. I think that we personally need to do a little better. And so when you kind of are going out about to start a campaign, find an ROI calculator and try to figure this out before you start a campaign. I mean, I ran this all the time for our paid stuff, but we haven't really run this for our own cold email outreach. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So can you say more on, I mean, it's the same question as the last thing, but how are you supposed to find these numbers before you actually run it? We can make it up, but we actually have we have few very large clients. So based on just a couple data points, is that enough?
Um, we work mostly on marketing. I think this kind of ties into the last conversation very tightly, right? So even though what it's challenging me, and where we got to have actually like a one-on-one conversation like later on today about our cold email campaign, is that we're generating a lot of activity, and we're generating a lot of like conversations, but are the conversations to the speakers that we're having on the show, are they our exact target, right? Like they should be related to accounts that we want to interact with, not necessarily like somebody who's marketing an accelerator, because there's nothing that we can do unless we want to start serving accelerators to help people that are marketing accelerators, right? Like the guy who disappeared today. So what it did to me when I saw this, I was like, oh, this is cool. We can run the campaign. But when you kind of tie that information back to the last one, is all the activity that we're doing at the top of the funnel, is it driving ROI, and is it driving closed won dollars at the end of the day? And we don't do that currently with our cold email campaign activity. And we should, just because it's so cheap for us.
Right, because we can track all the emails sent, we can track everyone who opens, we can track everyone that signs up, we can use Calendly, see who shows up. Just got to track it all and see who actually shows up. Yeah, I mean, this is very straightforward. I really have no further questions because it does tie to the first one. First one's, you got to have enough information to make a decision, and the second one's, here's the exact to make that decision.
Absolutely. And it's about the full cycle marketing, right? It's about not just, can I get impressions? Can I get clicks? Can I get signups? It's, can I get to revenue? And is this activity worth my time or not worth my time? And should I continue doing it? And, or should I double down, or should I not double down? And,
when you're sending an email campaign, that might not be apparent right away. Like right. Our first email has an 80% open rate. Our second email has a 65% open rate, but the click-through rate on the first one is 1%. Garbage. The click-through rate on the second one is 3%. Like the open rates go down, but the click-through rates go up as people actually spend the time to realize who you are.
Right. Which is weird, because in something like an AdWords campaign, and you're paying on CPC, like make the intention extremely high. Right. So if you're paying on CPC, it's only for people that exactly want your product. And maybe you only get a couple clicks, and you're willing to pay a lot of money for that. But the intent is so high that it makes it worth the campaign, versus, can I get 80% open rate on 20,000 emails? Yes. But our click-through rate and the follow-up on the body of the email just wasn't good enough. Right. So that just means that we have to iterate on the body of the email and find out what people really want to see in the body for that subject line. All right. The next one I would say, all right, it's this PDF. Cool. So I recently was with one of our clients, and we do a lot of data and data tracking and email marketing for them. And they got approached by a digital marketing agency. And the funny thing is about this client, I'm not throwing the client under the bus here or anything, is that I've been talking about these type of techniques and tactics, social selling and account-based marketing, for literally 5 years, right? So like from their perspective, we're email and data people, like alone. which is cool, and we make money, and it's great. But we've continued to like say, hey, what about your podcast? Like, why would you have a lot of great content? You could start a podcast, talk about it. I'm gonna actually skip all the way down here. And you have a lot of things that we can convert to videos. You're doing these micro infographics and email campaigns. Why aren't you putting these infographics on your website? So it's kind of like an old timey company. It's been around for 20 years, which is kind of newer, but it's in a very conservative industry, I should say. And so what really came out to me in this presentation, in the presentation, is about social selling. What is social selling? How do you leverage social media? What's the cycle of engagement, of how you learn from every single post that you post on social media? It talks about customer journey. It talks about buyer personas. I can slow down and go through all of this stuff, but I mean, this is not my deck. But basically what account-based marketing says is that you need to flip the funnel. It's not how many leads do I get at the top, and how do I funnel them down through a customer journey to spit out one marketing qualified lead, or one conversion, or 10 meetings, then I convert 3 of them, and there's this funnel. I actually only want to concentrate on these 10 accounts or these 100 accounts. And when you're concentrating on 100 accounts, you must have a product that it needs to be for products that are $12,000 a year and above. So if you're selling something that's $12,000 a year and above, and there's lots of economics behind that, but the price metrics, then you can start doing what's called account-based marketing, where you identify 100 accounts and the 4 to 8 decision makers that are going to be at each of those accounts. And then you have to create content and put that content in front of those 8 people before you even do an outbound outreach, right? So there's this old saying with General Electric that their whole entire marketing campaign is, we are going to put the logo of General Electric in front of every single person in the United States 8 times a year. And the idea is, if we can get a brand impression in front of somebody 8 times a year, then they'll always have General Electric at the top of the mind when they're looking for light bulbs or dryers or whatever General Electric makes today. And it's a little bit like passe, but the approach is kind of similar in account-based marketing, except I don't need everybody in the United States. I need the 800 people that are the 8 decision makers at these 100 companies. And each one of these decision makers have their own personality, persona, desires, triggers, warnings, personalities that you need to create content for, right? So you can think about it on a psychological level of like the Ocean model, like openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neuroticism. And you can kind of feed into your ads into those 5 types, right? For example, if somebody's more neurotic, they're more interested in about security. And so if you're targeting one of your 8 people in your buyer persona is the CISO, you could say something along the lines of the most secure email and data platform in the last 10 years, right? And so now you're talking one ad that you're going to send to all 800 people, but for those 100 people who are CISOs in those audiences, like they're going to trigger on it because that's what they trigger to, is security, right? And so you have to figure out the 5 to 8 different messages and ads that you want across those 5 to 8 different people and personas, and then fill out and get those ads in front of those 800 people. Yeah, that's what you do on a paid side.
Do you put all 5 of those ads in front of the 8 people and let them self-select what personality type they are?
You can do both, right? So you can there's a platform that does this really well called Terminus, and they're rad. They kind of run the whole ABM Flip My Funnel community. It's a little bit expensive. Demandbase also does this, so it's been for a while. I think some of the The challenge now is the amount of programmatic ads that so Terminus and Demandbase would sit on top of DoubleClick, right? And DoubleClick would then kind of like make these, they would sit on top of there and there'd be like a little bit of a Chinese wall, and then you would serve out those ads. What's happened in the last 4 to 5 years is that all of the ad spend has moved towards Facebook and AdWords, and it's a little bit harder to do on Facebook now and Google than it was when it was more blogs, more programmatic advertising spending on DoubleClick. So while they work on DoubleClick, less and less people are going to, they're sticking to social, and less people are moving, are seeing those programmatic ads. So it's a little bit difficult. And LinkedIn has a great product for this, but the CPMs we're seeing is like $200 to $300 CPMs, right?
Super high.
Yeah, they're super high CPMs. While the targeting with Terminus campaign I ran like 3 years ago, which worked really well, was in the like the $10 to $20 range. So for the audience, like let's, in that example, it'd be like all 800 people. Worked really well.
Pivoting the question from how you actually get and serve in front of that audience, how do you find those 8 decision makers? Because you probably don't know, except, I mean, we can generate titles and we can say who are the C team and C suite. But if you're working for a product in a specific part of the company, like I just want the VPs of marketing, how do you find out below the top echelon who the decision makers are?
Got it. I mean, there's 2 ways to do it. I mean, like that's literally what we do for companies. So like lay a plug here, like we find people and personas, we map personas to their customer journey, and then we find the emails, the personal emails and the work emails of those individuals. I mean, that's what we do for a lot of companies. If you weren't going to use a lead generation company or a data company like us, I would do Upwork. I'd get some VAs and I would tell them, you have to know who your customer personas are and your buyer personas already and the titles already. But once you do, you can go to a VA, virtual assistant that'll find it. They'll be like anywhere from 5 to 10 cents a lead. Like generally it's like 5 cents to 25 cents per email that they get. And they take a lot of time, but it's not expensive. It's very affordable. And we average out about 10 cents a lead at scale. So, I mean, we're competitive too. It's just like, if you want every single person in the United States, you come to us, right? So we do.
Okay, subtle plug. What's the next hack?
The next hack? Well, okay. So I think what was interesting about this is, I've seen a lot of like ABM decks before, but what I really appreciated was some of like the social selling techniques around how do you get everybody in your company. And this is tricky. Every salesperson in your company should have a similar type of posting on social, which is like a really weird territory, because every time I see this trying to be applied, it's good to talk about in theory. All your salespeople should have this type of pitch in their profile. But every time I try to see this applied, people get very weary about their social profile and using it for work purposes in a way that's unnatural to them, right? So every time I've seen a company say, hey, you need to put this on your social media, or you need to like or engage with this post, there's been complete utter no, I'm not doing it, or that's great, my social media is my own. So I thought, even though it's a strategy can work really well, and we do some of those same things where we have like similar pitches in our profiles, and then when we're doing a particular campaign and we're running something, we do that because we're founders and we want it to work, and we're all in. But a lot of other employees aren't all in. So I thought that was like one interesting thing is like, how do you, I don't know the answer to this question. How do you incentivize everybody at a company to buy in on and give up their social profile and their LinkedIn profile in particular to help promote the company? I don't know how to do that.
Seems to me like you need a UTM code. You need to show what traffic is actually driven from this profile and tell them that if a lead comes in, they'll benefit from it.
That's cool. Yeah, you could do something like that. That might be an interesting product too. It's almost like you're creating an internal affiliate marketing. Um,
Exactly.
that's neat. But what I really liked about this deck was that all of these different pieces of content, and Pam from last week, she was also did a really good job of like talking about how you need to arm marketing with content, and how do you need to enable salespeople with content in a particular way along the individual's customer journey. And there's a couple of these things that we're doing, like ebooks, surveys, events, white papers, webinars. I'm not going to go and read all of them, but if you're applying a account-based marketing strategy, if you're applying an ABM strategy, you need to run through that for every single individual, right? You need to run through how many videos do they need to watch, how many ebooks do they need to download, how many white papers that they need to engage with, or impressions that they make before that they're ready. And when you get enough people, the real concept is, if you have 4 out of 5 people, or 4 out of 8 people, let's say 50%, that are ready, that have enough information to make a purchasing decision because they've engaged with enough content, then that's when you should reach out and start a conversation. Not until then, right? So you need to buy all their ads, eat all their impressions, eat all their attention with animations and micrographics and blogs and podcasts, and be tracking all this data until you hit a high enough score where they're ready for a conversation. And I think that I still believe in ABM. It's really hard to pull off. It takes a lot of programming. We generally supply the data for a lot of these campaigns. That's our piece in the puzzle, and we're building tools to provide more impressions. But I think it's something I've seen it work. It's worked with Sendoso. It's worked with some of our other clients, and it's amazing.
For sure. It's amazing to see just how many things are up there on that list for account-based marketing, and to think about hooking them all together. It's already past 35 minutes, so we can close at any time. Mike, do you have any questions about anything that's gone on before we wrap it up?
Appreciate your time. Thanks for
Cool.
running through that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, this is Monday, May 4th. Another Masters of Marketing into the books. Thank you for everybody for joining. We'll throw up the slides on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and really appreciate everybody's time today.